I want to acknowledge we're on the land of the Southern Pomo and Coast Miwok, on the Federated Indians of Great Rancheria, their ancestral lands and their sovereign property. So thank you for always acknowledging that too at OAEC here. I think that's really significant. If we're going to honor Indigenous sovereignty, we do it wherever we are. And that's really a level of protocol that is happening more and more, with people really honoring and recognizing that wherever you go, you're on Indigenous lands. Whether they are recognized or not recognized, or whether they're visible or invisible, whether they've been given an extinction sentence by an archaeologist or an anthropologist or a historian, there are living descendants of the first peoples wherever you go. So that's something we really try to remember at the Cultural Conservancy. I thank you so much for those great opening comments. You framed it so beautifully. And thank you also for putting out these two kind of Bibles, right, in this field and in this world. I'm so honored to be a colleague and friend of Robin Wall Kimmerer, and I actually just completed a podcast with her. We started a new podcast called The Native Seed Pod. We are an antidote to the monoculture, is our tagline. And when I had a great conversation with Robin Kimmerer up at Cranberry Lake Biological Preserve in upstate New York in Mohawk territory, we talked a lot about seed dispersal strategies. And the title of that talk was Trusting in Abundance and Finding Your Regeneration Niche. And I think that's very appropriate to this discussion of resilience. It's like finding your regeneration niche. What is it that can help you regenerate and be resilient? And I like how you framed it, very much also connected to the concept of resistance, which I'll get to as well with the immune system, and also renewal. You know, that to be resilient, we have to constantly renew ourselves individually, in organizations. Movement Generation is here right now in a renewal process. OAEC has been in a renewal with this new, beautiful, you know, sacred mythical landscape you're creating here. So how is resilience related to the concepts of renewal and also resistance? Because like you said, those three get thrown around a lot now, and they're very distinct and yet very much interrelated. So I want to speak to you a little bit about what I've learned about resilience, mainly from the Indigenous communities I've been honored to work with, my own Anishinaabe community, as well as a larger group, especially the people here of California, where I've been born and raised and live on these native California Indian lands. And also being part of the nonprofit community with all the ups and downs of nonprofit resilience over decades, right, of work together. So I would say, first of all, one of the biggest lessons in resilience that I've gained from indigeneity, the concept of being indigenous, is that we have to reframe this concept of the self, the very concept of the self. So I am not an individual self. According to our values and cultural frameworks, we are part of a collective identity. Like I said, to be resilient, what do you want to get back to? What do you want to have coherent? Even though it's fluid, what is coherent that you want to maintain? So that collective identity, you are part of a tribe. You are part of a nation. We are part of the human family. As the Navajo say, we're part of the five-fingered clan. Not raccoons as well, but the humans, the bipedal, the walking, or the five-fingered clan. So we're part of the human family. So we have this collective identity. Going smaller with our different tribal nations, we have clan systems. So I'm part of the Lynx clan. Other people are part of the Bear clan. Other people are part of the Turtle clan. So then we're actually related to another identity, which is an ecological identity, because we are connected to those clan families. So the turtle teaches us wisdom, going slow, longevity, observation, burrowing down into the earth, right? The lynx is a forest dweller and a snow dweller, walking very quietly on the earth, being able to move very fast and very quick if needed. Good hunters. The bear is always out, omnivorous, on the edges of the forest and the open plains, and will eat anything, right? It's got a much wider opportunity for survival and thriving. Others are much more specific. There are fish clans. What does it mean to be aquatic and in water all the time? There are loon and eagle clans being up in the air. Often the eagle clans are leaders, are chiefs, because they have the foresight to see everything and to see long distances, and also to be able to strike when needed for hunting. So that clan system is a form of governance and a form of ecological identity that makes us know that we are part of something so much larger. We also have a metaphysical identity or a cosmological identity. Going back to our creation stories and our original instructions, it says, we came from the sky, we came from the stars. We are stardust, right? Astrophysics says this too, biology says this too. But our traditional knowledge says that we come from either the sky or from the earth. The Pueblo people, they come up under the domes of the earth like the seeds. So they are earth people. Others come from the ocean. So we have these ecological identities based on our local ecosystems. And that gives us a sense that we are part of something so much larger that makes us more resilient, because there's a certain faith or trust in the abundance of the ecological life force that gives everybody a sense of belonging. So those kind of metaphysical and philosophical principles help us be resilient in the face of great oppression, historical injustices, attempted genocide. Native peoples have lost so much, and yet people are always shocked when they go to Native communities. They're like, oh my God, they're the most generous people, right? You may have had that experience. You go to a reservation community and it's like people hardly have anything. They give you the shirt off their backs, give you the big meal, whatever it is. It's like, wow, because there's a value, it's a cultural value. It's not an ethnic identity, it's a cultural value that says, if you give, you will be given in return. Reciprocity is actually an ecological principle. There's always a give and be given, a give and receive. That reciprocity, to trust in that, is trusting in abundance rather than a scarcity model. And that really helps engender a sense of resilience and generosity. And the generosity of seeds, for example, that happens with one apple tree or with one corn plant, right? The level of the number of seeds that are produced is profuse, right? There's always enough, there's redundancy, because we know that that's going to ensure future survival, future adaptability. Also, as Indigenous peoples, we know that we can have ceremonies to renew ourselves. And so the reason that we have such an emphasis on ceremony is to have practices of gratitude and practices of sacrifice and self-restraint. That also leads to understanding of resilience, because you have to do without sometimes to be able to appreciate what you really have. And that helps us be more conservative, not in a political sense, but in the real sense. Like Winona LaDuke was you say, I'm a true conservative, right? Native peoples are the true conservatives. We want to conserve and protect the resources and the relatives that give us life. We don't want to keep consuming and mining and extracting. So to have ceremonies where we fast for a little while, we take a break from food and water, right? We maybe work really hard for months and months to work on some regalia or to work on some moccasins. And then we give those away. We give those to the oldest, or we give those to the youngest, so that we learn sacrifice. And small-scale sacrifice is a way that we also practice gratitude, because you know what it takes to make something. You know what it takes to put energy into something. And that is a gift that is offered to the community, because one day that community is going to offer it back to you. And again, that's the principle of reciprocity. That is so fundamental, but it really takes effort. You've got to, give and sacrifice so that you know that you will receive as well. So those are some principles of resilience. Also, we find great resilience in our languages. And yesterday we were talking quite a bit about biocultural diversity, right? The areas that are connected to the highest level of endemicism of native plant species, are often also correlated with places of high biological diversity or cultural diversity with endemic languages, or languages that are found nowhere else. Even right here in California, we're in the California Floristic Province for endemic plant species, a place of high biological diversity for all the beautiful native plants in this area. California also was a place of high linguistic diversity. Over 100 distinct languages spoken right here in California. It's kind of extraordinary, based on 6 different root languages. You know, it's mutually unintelligible as, you know, Swahili and Cantonese, or German and Tongan. So we are in a place of great linguistic diversity, and if diversity is our best defense for resilience and maintaining resilience, we need to invest and support diverse languages. And so that's something that we do, and a lot of people do in the Indigenous world. Many people say, what does saving a language or revitalizing language have to do with, you know, surviving climate change, right? What's the connection there? Well, if you want to hear from people who actually have stories of climate change going back to, you know, the Ice Age, going back to different cataclysmic ecological events, and even experiencing relocation, experiencing climate change directly, even within the last century, as many Native people were forcibly marched from one area, the Carolinas, to Oklahoma. They experienced climate change. Or the Apache, most extreme, they went from the Sonoran Desert, were marched to the Everglades of Florida. You know, that's radical climate change, and yet they survived. Not everyone did, a lot of them perished. But Kyle White, a great Potawatomi philosopher, talks about how Native peoples have experienced climate change numerous times through relocation and diaspora, as have been many communities around the world. So what does it mean to end up in a completely different climate, completely different landscape, completely different set of institutions, and still survive and thrive? Right? That's a really big question. And many actually oppressed peoples have some of those tools and have some of those resilient skills, which are related to that larger identity, which are related to social practices, which are related to indigenous forms of governance, which are related to going back to the land. Even though it may look foreign, it may look different, the land can always teach us how to live in a sustainable way if we listen, right? We all have to become native to place again, no matter what our background is and how we got there. Yes, immigrants can be very good native settlers, can be very good settlers. So it's really important to recognize the diversity, or what we call Apache Mosaic in ecological terms, that we live in Apache Mosaic, and that we need to become native to place again, and that means we're learning these skills of resilience in our communities, in our organizations, and individually. And languages also teach us completely different ways of thinking, knowing, and being. For example, my Anishinaabe language, the Blackfoot language, the Cree language, we are a verb-based language. We're not a noun-based language. So everything is about flow and process and movement and dynamics that is much more closer to ecological principles and what physics is finding out too, you know, with the wave-particle duality dilemma, right? We're more like waves than particles. And so indigenous worldviews teach us to trust in flow, right? That's why there's this whole concept of Indian time, and people are like, Native people are always late, but I've also heard it as Arab time, and this time, and that time. So many traditional cultures have this idea of, you know, not following this linear time clock. Well, part of being resilient is listening to what's happening in the organism and going with the flow of what's happening in nature, what's happening with the climate, what's happening in your community. It doesn't mean you're late. It just means you have to prioritize other things because you're responsive to the moment. You're being in the flow and the dynamics of what's happening in that time. So those are a few examples, and you know, one really important source of knowledge for us are the three sisters of Native American agriculture. There is so much depth and so much wisdom in that polyculture. The symbiosis, the mutualistic symbiosis of corns, beans, and squash. And how, you know, as Robin Kimmer speaks about it so eloquently in her book and many other writings and in conversations, you know, corn is the first sister. She is very strong. She is deeply rooted, and she reaches for the sky, right? She is so fertile, so productive, so prolific, and she provides an anchor, right? And so really this corn is a symbol of what we would call indigenous science, because it's rooted also in an ethical framework and cultural values that are about reciprocity, respect, and renewal. And then the beans with those beautiful tendrils that like to move all over the place is a little bit more like the Western mind, Western science, right? Curiosity, wonder, investigation, need to know. Those tendrils left on their own will go anywhere, and they'll splice atoms and genetically modify seeds and create all kinds of things without thinking about the long-term consequences. But if those tendrils have a framework of corn and can spiral around corn, then they know they have an ethical cultural framework that is really responsible to the soil. And they also then give nutrients back to the ground in terms of nitrogen fixing. So beans are super important. We need it, and it's a symbol of kind of the bicultural thinking that we need to have right now, or bicognitive thinking. To reclaim our indigenous ways of thinking and to honor the best of Western scientific technological thinking. And then the squash is kind of like that ethical space that kind of mediates between two sisters. You know, there's also a third sister, right? Who's like, oh, no, right, mediating. So it's down there shading, protecting the soil, making sure not other weeds grow, keeping it moist. And so we also need that third sister to kind of keep a good relationship between the three sisters. So that is really an example of mutualistic symbiosis, of a polyculture, of the benefits where the whole is truly greater than the sum of the parts, and you get that emergent property. Then you get the fourth sister, which is each one of us, right? We're that fourth sister who tends those three sisters. And that is our responsibility today, to create a sustainable, resilient future, is to get in line with those three sisters and be a part of that polyculture. So thank you so much for listening to my words and being here with us, and looking forward to more conversation. To wish.